Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Ohio Has Issues. I'm Stephanie Haney. I know you're very used to seeing Mike Polk Jr. here with me. He's not here today. You're stuck with little old me, and we are here to talk about politics as we do once a week to get you ready for this election. We've got a very busy newsroom back behind me. We are in the final stretch, y'all. We've got 40 days to Election Day. November 5th is going to be here before we know it. So here's your reminder. The last day to register to vote is October 7th. That is also coming very, very quickly. So check your voter registration. Make sure you're all locked up for that because voting has already begun in the state of Ohio. It has begun for military members and people living overseas. So we are in it, and now we are in the home stretch. And we've got a great show for you today. There's a lot of stuff going on here in Ohio. Ohio has issues, has never been more true. We are still talking about Springfield, Ohio. And today we're talking about the fact that former President Donald Trump and Senator for Ohio and his running mate, J.D. Vance, could potentially face criminal charges for the things that they're saying about Haitians eating pets, which is categorically untrue in Springfield, Ohio. So we're going to have attorney Subodh Chandra with us. He's representing a group that has filed seeking those criminal charges against the former president and his running mate. We're also talking about political ads. And they are overwhelming. There are so many political ads. I can't tell you the number of people who have told me that they are just incredibly frustrated with ad after ad after ad. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're going to talk about the absurd amount of money that's being spent on political ads here in the state of Ohio. We're going to have a friend of the show back to do that with us. It's Andrew Tobias, who has been with us many times as a political reporter for Cleveland.com, but now he's with Signal, Ohio, where he's covering state politics and government here in the state. So we'll talk with him in a little bit, but we're going to start first with your Ohio roundup. And the Portage County Sheriff's Office continues to make headlines. So the Portage County Sheriff is currently Bruce Zukowski. That's him right there. And the County Board of Elections in Portage County has said that the County Sheriff's Department will not be used for election security. Why would that be happening, you may ask? Well, in case you aren't aware, Sheriff Zukowski had a social media post saying that people with Kamala Harris yard signs should have their addresses recorded so that immigrants can be sent to live with them if the Democratic vice president wins the November election and goes on to become the president of the United States. Well, that is something that has been seen as voter intimidation. The ACLU of Ohio is actually declaring victory after he took down the controversial Facebook post, which, as I've said, is something that people are saying amounts to voter intimidation. In a statement on the Portage County Democrats Facebook page, the County Board of Elections Chair Randy Kleitz said that members voted on Friday. They voted 3-1 to remove the Sheriff's Department from providing security during in-person absentee voting. They talked about public comments indicating perceived intimidation by the sheriff against certain voters and a need to make sure every voter in Portage County feels safe casting their ballot for any candidate they choose. Now, there's more fallout from these comments made by the current sheriff, who is seeking re-election. The Akron Beacon-Journal editorial board is calling for withholding your vote from Sheriff Zukowski. So this is the opposite of an endorsement. It's an anti-endorsement. Some quotes from the article are that the racist undertones of his post are similar to language used by the former president Donald Trump, who in the past has compared his political opponents to vermin. Sheriff Zukowski has used the word locusts to refer to immigrants. The editorial board went on to say that it's disturbing to see an elected official taking freedom of speech to these heights and inhibiting freedom of speech by limiting comments on that post when it was up. They say that it is time for the incivility to stop. It's past time, actually, for the incivility to stop, and that there are ways to support stricter border control without spreading hate and fear, because that's how people get hurt, and that's what history has shown us time and again. So the chair of the Portage County Republican Party said that she believed the sheriff's statement was simply, quote, an artistic license getting toward the principal belief that elections have consequences. Sheriff Zukowski said something very similar in his public response to backlash about the Facebook post, saying that with elections, there are consequences. So here's a quote from the editorial board of the Akron Beacon-Journal. There certainly are. We highly advise withholding your vote from Zukowski in this upcoming election bid. We'd much rather see the consequences of such elections bring the defeat of a leader who clings to culture wars rather than the degradation of democracy. Now, if you're wondering who Zukowski's challenger is, that person's name is John Barber. All right, we're moving on now to a little bit of talk about redistricting. The Ohio Legislative Black Caucus Foundation, which is made up of black members of Ohio's House and Ohio Senate, they are reaffirming their endorsement of Issue 1, and they're making this very clear after the ballot board's summary language has become final related to Issue 1. So there was a press release that was sent out from this group of Ohio representatives and senators, and they say they have concerns about that final language that it will appear on the November ballot, and they want to tell voters this, that Issue 1 seeks to replace the current politician-led redistricting system with a 15-member citizen commission, ensuring transparency and fairness in creating voting districts across Ohio. Now, the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus is concerned that the language inaccurately portrays the amendment's intent. The intent of this amendment is to get rid of gerrymandering. The voting districts in Ohio have been determined to be badly gerrymandered by outside groups, by our Ohio Supreme Court multiple times. So the maps that we are currently operating under are, no doubt about it, no questions, they are gerrymandered. So OLBC is saying that the final wording suggests that the Citizen Commission could be forced to gerrymander districts, which is a false and misleading characterization, and that it undermines the fundamental purpose of Issue 1, which is to put an end to partisan gerrymandering and create impartial voting districts. So here's a quote from the president of OLBC. This is Representative Terrence Upchurch. "We cannot allow misleading ballot language to obscure what's really at stake. Issue 1 is about fairness, transparency, and making sure that Ohioans, not politicians, decide how voting districts are drawn. It's critical for the future of our democracy." Now, when people are trying to get the word out about issues and campaigns here in Ohio, we have been inundated, absolutely inundated with political ads. There are political ads out there for Ohio's U.S. Senate race, which is, for all intents and purposes, between the incumbent Senator Sherrod Brown and the Republican challenger Bernie Moreno. There is Libertarian Don Kissick, who has thrown his hat in the ring. We will tell you just a little bit about Don Kissick in a little bit. But right now we're going to bring in Andrew Tobias. Mike had a conversation with Andrew about ads and what we're seeing here in the state of Ohio in his new role with Signal Ohio.
Andrew Tobias from Signal, Ohio. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, happy to be here.
All right, we're going to talk money today. I don't know if you know about this, but there's a lot of money in this whole political game, particularly, it seems, in Ohio right now. And we're going to talk about two particular campaigns that are receiving a lot of cash and where it's coming from, which you've recently written about, handy enough. We're going to talk about the Senate, of course, the highest spending congressional race, I believe, in the United States. Is that right?
Yeah, you could call it the highest non-presidential race in the country. So yeah, it's a big deal.
But before we get to that, let's first talk about Issue 1. Obviously, the ballot initiative to try and fix the redistricting process here in Ohio. They are the pro-Issue 1 people have released their ad, and the anti-Issue 1 people have released an ad. First of all, why don't you tell us about sort of the messaging in each of those ads? What are they trying to get across? Because that's probably indicative of what they think is going to Ohioans will respond well to.
So the first ad from the Yes campaign flashes Jim Harbaugh's face on the screen. It reminds me of going to a Cavs game and the other team shooting a free throw, and they're just trying to provoke that visceral boo from your average hot-blooded Ohioan. But it kind of compares it to the cheating scandal that Michigan was involved with, saying that it's cheating to film the other team's plays. It's also cheating to draw your own political lines and so on. So it's a little bit of a trying to force the metaphor a little bit, but it's obviously college football season. They're trying to get attention. The thing about that ad too is that it's basically digital only, and so that matters in the sense that if it's a digital ad, you can make sure that somebody who's watching a football game or who is a football fan gets to see that ad. So it tends to be a little bit more targeted about who the audience is. And I'll say they actually do have a separate broadcast ad they released. And it's a little bit more general. It shows a Republican. He says, "I'm a conservative Republican." And it's a guy standing in front of like a barn there's a Democrat and there's an independent, and they all say we all support issue one. So it's pretty standard. On the no side, they haven't yet. So they announced the ad. They said it's going to be a statewide TV ad, but they've yet to actually book the advertising time. So we're basically waiting to see how much money they actually have. But the ad, very simple. It flashes Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's pictures on the screen, says Democrats are trying to cheat, and they're also trying to cheat by ramming issue one through. So very standard Republican messaging, just trying to tie this to Democrat in a state that Republicans generally expect to win.
Okay, so with candidates, you have to reveal, I suppose, your to a degree, where your campaign funds are coming from. Is that the same thing with issues, or no?
Yeah, essentially, there's sort of nuances to it, but it's possible to often see where it comes from, but sometimes it's from what we call a dark money group that doesn't disclose the donors itself. So, but we at least know how much money they spend and how much money they raise. So we know the Yes campaign has spent about $20 million on TV ads, with them starting to air. I mean, it's sort of just a big number, but it's enough that you will see it on a week-to-week basis. One of the thoughts I have, though, is I wonder if they're going to get drowned out by all of the Senate spending that we're talking about. I know that when I just flip on the TV, it's just back to back to back to back Senate ads. So on the no side, so the most recent deadline to disclose information about campaign spending was at the end of July. The no campaign had really yet to do anything then. And so we just don't know much about what's going on with them. I've heard some things about how much they expect to raise, but they generally have said they expect to get outspent by the Yes side. And so it's kind of, the reason why we talk about this stuff is that for something like a ballot issue, voters may not have a deep-seated view on redistricting reform. And so these types of ads can be extra influential in communicating to voters what it actually is, especially I think in this campaign, you're going to have both sides claim to be against gerrymandering, and it's going to frankly make it extra confusing. And so some of how you can brand this stuff is just to get your ads in front of people and burn into their brains as much as you can what the issue actually is that they're voting on. Because if we're Republican and Democrat, even people have opinions about the parties, but stuff like this, it's a little bit harder for voters to discern.
And I suppose it could be assumed that was sort of muddying the waters, might have been in the strategy book for Republicans who know that people are sort of against gerrymandering for them as a concept to begin with. And that is also probably why it was so important for them to try and make sure that ballot language actually made it in, and why everybody worked so hard to make sure it got there. That's just an assumption on my part. We don't have any idea how much actual money, though, and where it would be coming from for the no campaign? Like, who was this outside this? Would this be outside the state?
So I have a loose idea. I'm just going to let it rip, and we'll see whether or not this turns out to be the case. So I just want to qualify this, and that I'm not reporting this. It's just kind of what I've heard, and we'll see whether or not this turns out to be the case. The fundraising for this kind of thing would come from Republican congressional members who basically have something to lose here if their districts get redrawn. So I know that they've been trying to get them to raise money. You've seen some Republican congressional leaders nationally come in and raise money for this, and so there are national stakes, which is that there's only about 25 to 30 competitive congressional districts in the country. And right now, 3 of them are in Ohio. And so what they would be telling their donors, whoever rich Republican X person in some state somewhere, is that, what happens in Ohio really could affect our ability to hold or keep, the majority in the future. So we don't know if that's going to be something that national donors go for, but I'm sure they're looking for that money. So we'll find out, though. There's going to be a deadline in mid-October. That's when we'll find out more about this, which is kind of unfortunate because people are going to be seeing these ads for however many weeks by then. But that's how the deadline works right now.
Yeah, we are being inundated right now, and as you said, it might be problematic as far as them actually having space, especially on local TV and whatnot, to put the advertising, because a lot of this stuff has been booked way in advance, and the Senate ate up a lot of the Senate race in Ohio, ate up a lot of that space, right?
Yes, and actually, candidates get kind of first in line for booking this kind of stuff, whereas issue ads, it's basically, it's non-candidate. So that's a real problem. I mean, I'm not in the ad business, so I don't know if they can just like cut 2 minutes off of, How I Met Your Mother or something and throw a couple more, couple more ad slots in or something like that. But there is an issue of there actually just being enough time in the hour to stuff more ads into.
It's interesting. I actually, working at WKYC, the Cleveland NBC affiliate, and we've heard from stations in other states that some TV stations, local TV stations, are actually adding a half hour of news programming. So they would like bump that old episode of How I Met Your Mother, and they would say, "No, we got more news for you." And then it's just a weather lady going, "It's going to be hot today, and here's 40 minutes of ads." And that's really what the programming is now. So people are finding ways to take advantage of this expensive political moment, I suppose.
Yeah, you have to expect the ingenuity of that.
Okay, so moving on to the Senate, you've got some hard numbers for us here as far as what's being spent and what the candidates are saying about it and when it's being spent. Why don't you first tell us what's going on with Senator Sherrod Brown's spending and how's that looking?
So I've been tracking this for a while, and the reason why there's so much money being spent in this race is that Sherrod Brown is one of two Democrats who sit in the Senate in a state that Trump won twice. The other one is Jon Tester in Montana. At this point, I'm not a Montana reporter, but things aren't looking very good for Jon Tester, and it's kind of maybe going to come down to Sherrod Brown as far as who actually controls the Senate after this year's election. So just a lot at stake for both parties, and so that's why we're seeing the number of ads that I have is $240 million have been reserved. I've seen larger numbers than that. So, but it's just a lot. And, it's kind of gotten to such a big number that it's almost, in the abstract, actually trying to keep track of it kind of beyond that. So what we saw from Sherrod Brown, the split of the spending that I described is about the same, but Sherrod Brown is running ads over the summer and Bernie Moreno, the Republican, wasn't airing anything. And so I think the idea was that they wanted to, in a Republican leading state, tell voters that, you might be a Republican or you might vote for a Republican, but you don't want to vote for this Republican. And what we've seen now that the summer's passed and we're kind of in the thick of campaign season, Bernie Moreno is actually outspending Sherrod Brown, at least, the Bernie Moreno's campaign and his supporters, outside groups, national Republican groups, stuff like that. They're outspending the pro or the Sherrod Brown side about 2 to 1. It's about 60 million to about 30 million. And that's a real change because, like I said, Brown kind of had the airways to himself for months. And so it's a real fundamental change, and people this will show up on TV. You're just going to see more pro Bernie Moreno ads unless the Democratic side steps up.
Now, in your writing, you said that Bernie Moreno kind of expressed that it was a choice for him to save his money and keep his war chest until the end and make a big push. And he sort of ridiculed Senator Brown for spending it, wasting it over the money, or wasting it over the summer, or dropping it over the summer. Do you think is that a legitimate? Is that really a legitimate strategy of his? Is that from what you understand?
For Brown?
No, for Bernie Moreno, was it really his intent to wait to spend his money until this late, as opposed to Brown, who was doing it all over the summer?
Yeah, it kind of reflects that Brown had more money to begin with. It's a strategy. It's frankly probably, we talked about the Issue 1 campaign earlier. That's probably why the No campaign hasn't gone up yet. They're basically waiting until later in the election season. Republicans believe that their voters are less likely to vote early. And so they think that they see more value in waiting later in the calendar anyways, although they would spend the money earlier if they had it. So it's not, it is sort of a function of working within a budget. But yeah, I mean, it probably reflects the constraints that he had, but at the same time, they have all this money coming down now that we're closer to when people are actually making a decision. So, like I said before, the term that people use when you are trying to get up first with ads in a political race is that you want to define your opponent. Bernie Moreno is somebody that a lot of people have never heard of, and so if the first thing that you hear about him is that he's a bad guy, that's the idea that what Sherrod Brown is kind of trying to do. But whether or not that works, I guess we'll see. But it's just, like I said, it's just a real fundamental change now that Moreno's, up with so many ads. And again, this race is going to be super close. And I think people, I always kind of laugh about the amount that gets spent, and sort of you can question how much of a difference it really makes, but it can make a difference sort of the margins, and this is going to be a very close race. And so yeah, that's why people are spending all this money.
And then you think about what you could do, and I know that this is pie in the sky, but what Ohio could do with that over $200 million in political spending to just shore up the state in a bunch of different ways, or pay off Deshaun Watson and make him go away forever. We could do it that way too. But really, all the good you could do, how many kids could you feed? How many schools could you build? How many playgrounds could you make and stuff like that? And we're just shoveling it all onto local news and saying, this guy's a jerk. No, this guy's a jerk. And that's where all the money's going. Isn't it a great system?
Yeah, it keeps the lights on at TV stations for another 4 years. So that's, near and dear to all of us here, right?
You did have some information about where their funding is coming from as far as, do you know the contrast for both candidates between what is coming in from outside parties and dark money groups as opposed to what is coming in from individual donations from actual voters?
So I don't have the firm numbers available off the top of my head. Generally, Sherrod Brown has raised more money directly from his campaign. So there are limits on the amount of money that candidate campaigns can accept. So that's more likely to be small dollar donations, although it's not necessarily the case. Very difficult to generalize. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, but generally speaking, Moreno is benefiting from more outside money. There are political entities associated with Mitch McConnell, who's the Republican leader of the Senate, but there's certainly that type of equivalent spending supporting Brown too. Something that's kind of interesting, one of the sources of money that's tipping the balance here in September is there is a political action committee that's associated with the cryptocurrency industry. I wish I could remember what it's called. They intentionally make these things all sound the same.
Right.
It's something like Defend Ohio Jobs, or, Ohioans for Ohio, or something
Ohioans
like
for
that.
Flags for Freedom.
Yeah, but Moreno is somebody who people in Cleveland might remember. He was behind a big civic push about, 8 years ago to try to make Cleveland a crypto currency blockchain.
Still know what it means, but I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, and so that is an issue that he's interested in. But you would see him in the preceding months going to cryptocurrency and blockchain conferences and speaking at those things. Kind of a weird decision if you think about, what do voters really care about? That's probably not what they're voting on. But I believe he's probably networking, trying to, knowing that there was this big pot of cryptocurrency associated money coming up. Sherrod Brown is the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee that regulates this kind of thing. So it makes sense why the cryptocurrency industry might be more interested in one candidate than the other and be willing to spend to, try to make sure their person wins.
Where are they off to this week that you know of? You know of their plans, either of the candidates? Do they have any appearances or anything coming up that you got your eye on?
So I've heard that Brown is in DC right now, and so there's kind of more official stuff going on. I've just generally heard that he's going to be campaigning in the state in October when early voting begins October 7th. So that's just coming up very soon. Moreno's been doing one-off events. He had last Friday, he was in Columbus, and he went down to Warren County to Cincinnati, where he made news there. It's sort of an aside to really talk about what happened, but they're out there. But Brown is kind of juggling the responsibilities of the Senate with campaigning, and then whereas Moreno is kind of campaigning all the time. So yeah, there's stuff going on. The one thing I'm wondering about though is whether these two guys are actually going to debate. Both people have said they want to. That's kind of something that can make a difference with voters, but it's also just a chance to, as a reporter, it's something that I look out for. And they haven't actually committed to doing that yet.
Now, you've had both of them actually saying, I would like to debate. And why isn't it happening then? Who's really the holdup?
In my experience, it's hard to really figure out what's happening with this kind of thing because both campaigns will say it's the other person's fault. I'll just say that fundamentally, I think that Brown has more to lose. By campaigning, it can only serve to promote Moreno, who's a lesser known candidate. And so the political textbook is that if I'm running from behind, I'll want to debate 10 times and, all 10 different regions of the state. And whereas if I'm the kind of leading candidate, I'll want to debate once in a bunker somewhere on local public television. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the general dynamic here. It would, I think, probably benefit Moreno more to debate, although not debating at all would be kind of breaking with tradition. It's something that might, Sherrod Brown might personally not really want to do, and also might be something that voters kind of look down upon. So, but that's the general dynamic. It's hard to know exactly what the issue was, because like I said, and both guys have said publicly they want to debate, and I just assume that they will, but it's a little strange they haven't scheduled something yet.
Andrew, thanks for the update, and congrats on the new gig at Signal, Ohio. We know you'll be crushing it there as well.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
Thanks, brother.
He knows that stuff backwards and forwards, and he can just pull up those numbers at the drop of a hat. Thank you very much, Andrew, and major get for Signal, Ohio. So yes, congratulations on that. Okay, so speaking of that Senate race, there's one candidate who we don't really know too much about. It's the Libertarian candidate, Don Kissick, as we move now to your Senate race update. So since he's not really saying that much, what I'm going to do is we're going to read some things off his website. I think it's from 2018, but we're still going to read something from his website every single week to give you a little bit of a better idea about who this person is. So today we are reading his thoughts on the power of the individual. Quote, "It is the individual who makes America great. It is the individual who creates prosperity through innovation, and it is the individual who can best decide for themselves what path to take in life and how to raise their family." And that is our little piece of information about Don Kissick for this week. We hope to have more for you leading up, but again, a little piece of his website between now and the election. All right, now let's move on to Republican challenger Bernie Moreno. Little backstory here. Last November, when Issue 1 was on the ballot, that Issue 1 was about abortion access. It was about enshrining access to abortion in the Ohio State Constitution. 57% of Ohio voters approved that constitutional amendment guaranteeing those abortion rights, and that rolled back efforts by the Republican-controlled Ohio General Assembly and the current governor, Mike DeWine, to curtail abortion access in Ohio. This is after the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. So, recently, Bernie Moreno made some comments. It was at a town hall in Warren County. This was on Friday, September 20th. This was first reported by WCMH, which is the NBC affiliate in Columbus, so you can hear those comments now for yourself.
So there's a lot of single issue, the left has a lot of single issue voters. Sadly, by the way, there's a lot of suburban women. A lot of suburban women that are like, listen, abortion's it. If I can't have an abortion in this country whenever I want, I will vote for anybody else. Okay, a little crazy, by the way, but especially for women that are like past 50, I'm thinking to myself, that's an issue for you.
So that was Bernie Moreno himself at a town hall event talking about how women being focused on abortion access was, quote, a little crazy. And lots of people took some issue with that. Republican Nikki Haley tweeted, actually, and said, "Are you trying to lose the election?" Asking for a friend. So obviously not a positive response there from Nikki Haley. So we reached out to Bernie Moreno's campaign and got a statement from spokesperson Reagan McCarthy. Quote, "Bernie was clearly making a tongue-in-cheek joke about how Sherrod Brown and members of the left-wing media like to pretend that the only issue that matters to women voters is abortion." She went on to say, "Bernie's view is that women voters care just as much about the economy, rising prices, crime, and our open southern border as male voters do, and it's disgusting that Democrats and their friends in the left-wing media constantly treat all women as if they're automatically single-issue voters on abortion who don't have other concerns that they vote on." Now, I do want to point out that I asked Reagan McCarthy some follow-up questions based on those claims there. I asked her to point me to the basis on which Mr. Moreno has come to the conclusion that Senator Brown views abortion as the only thing that matters to women. Also to explain how it could be a joke about what Mr. Moreno believes Senator Brown's views to be, since he didn't mention Senator Brown anywhere in there. I asked her if there was more to the video, if she could provide more to the quote. Maybe there were notes in the speech or something. And also asked to clarify why Mr. Moreno thinks access to abortion is not important to women over the age of 50, but I didn't get a response to any of those questions. Senator Sherrod Brown had this to say.
The idea that he doesn't understand why women care so much about this. And in some sense, he was mocking them, I think. It says a lot more about him, frankly, about him and his values. I continue to be shocked that Bernie Moreno thinks he knows more, that he knows better than 57% of Ohioans who turned out to vote and said that we want constitutional right to abortion in our state.
So that was Senator Sherrod Brown. Again, they're reiterating that 57% of Ohioans voted to enshrine abortion access into our Constitution last November. Okay, so now let's move on to an update about current Senator Sherrod Brown. He is the Democrat incumbent. United Auto Workers has announced support for him, so picking up that endorsement in Ohio's U.S. Senate race. And here is what President Shawn Fain had to say, United Auto Workers president. "No one fights for auto workers like Sherrod Brown, from standing with UAW workers on the picket lines to fighting bad trade deals that ship American jobs overseas." While Bernie Moreno has made it clear he only looks out for himself, UAW workers are proud to endorse Sherrod and fight for him like he always fights for us. And Senator Sherrod Brown said, quote, "I'm proud to have the support of UAW workers across the state as we stand together to fight for Ohio and the dignity of work." All right, now we're going to move on to your vice presidential update. You know, over the past couple weeks throughout the summer, there's been some conversation related to Senator J.D. Vance and his vice presidential candidacy, questions about whether he's actually passed the bar exam. And some of that has to do with the fact that he's changed his name 3 times. And J.D. is what he goes by, but his legal name is actually James David Vance. So here's a Verify fact check about that. With Senator for Ohio J.D. Vance running for vice president alongside former President Donald Trump, we've seen claims pop up online questioning whether the Yale Law School graduate ever passed the bar exam. A 3 News viewer also emailed and asked us, did J.D. Vance ever take and pass the bar? Searches in Ohio and California under his 3 names resulted in no evidence of passing. So let's verify the answer here. Our sources are J.D. Vance's campaign, Yale Law School, the Kentucky Office of Bar Admissions, the Kentucky Bar Association, and the Associated Press. First, let's address the name aspect of the question. The Associated Press published a thorough story detailing how J.D. Vance was named James Donald Bowman at birth, with his middle and last names after his biological father. Later, when his mother remarried, she changed his name to James David Hamill, in part to keep his first initials consistent, as he always went by J.D. Then, sometime before graduating law school, J.D. changed his legal name to James David Vance in honor of his grandparents who raised him. As for the bar exam piece of the puzzle, we started with reaching out to his campaign to ask when and where did Vance pass the bar exam. Spokesperson Luke Schroeder told us Senator Vance passed the bar in the state of Kentucky. To find out when he might have taken that bar exam and under what name, we checked with the Yale Law School Office of Public Affairs. Their spokesperson told us a person by the name of James David Vance received a Juris Doctor degree in May 2013 and attended Yale Law School from September 2010 to May 2013. From there, we checked the Kentucky Office of Bar Admissions website for bar exam results. When we checked the exam from July 2013, we saw that James David Vance of Cincinnati is listed as passing. Vance's profile with the Kentucky Bar Association confirms that he was admitted to practice law in October of 2013. That's the standard time for swearing in new lawyers after passing the July bar exam. So we can verify these claims being shared online are false. J.D. Vance did pass the bar exam in Kentucky in 2013, and he did it under his current legal name, James David Vance. So there you go. He did pass the bar exam and is registered as an attorney. All right, now speaking of the vice presidential situation, you know that we've also got Tim Walz on the ticket on the Democratic side. Well, a presidential historian by the name of Douglas Brinkley went on MSNBC's Morning Joe and said that this will be the most important vice presidential debate probably in United States history. It's happening in New York. It's next Tuesday, October 1st. It's the first and only scheduled debate for the vice presidential candidates. It'll be on CBS. The last vice presidential debate, if you remember, was between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. That was in 2020, and that was when that fly landed on Mike Pence's head that we all got to laugh about on SNL. Perhaps the most memorable moment for me from that debate. I'm sure there were more. It's obviously very important. I will have to go back and look at it to actually truly tell you. But a lot of people will be watching this debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz because it's probably the last debate we're going to see for the top of the ticket during this election cycle, because former President Donald Trump has already said that he will not be debating the current Vice President Kamala Harris again. Now, speaking of the vice presidential candidate on the Republican side, J.D. Vance, and also former President Donald Trump, they could face criminal charges related to the false claims that they've both been repeating multiple times about Haitian immigrants eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. There's a nonprofit organization that is advocating for Haitian immigrants. They filed criminal charges against former President Trump and running mate Senator Vance for, quote, baseless fear-mongering that legal Haitian immigrants in Springfield are eating their neighbors' pets. So they're represented by the Chandra law firm that's based in Cleveland. And the group is the nonprofit Haitian Bridge Alliance. So they are seeking that Trump and Vance be arrested and charged with disrupting public service, making false claims, committing telecommunications harassment, committing aggravated menacing, and violating the prohibition against complicity. A lot of words there. So to kind of clear up exactly what's on the table here and what could potentially come next, let's speak to the person representing this group. Subodh Chandra joins Ohio Has Issues now. Subodh, thank you for being with us here on Ohio Has Issues. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
So we're here today to talk about a filing that your law firm has entered in Clark County on behalf of your client, the Haitian Bridge Alliance. So tell me about that client. What is this group?
The Haitian Bridge Alliance is a national advocacy organization, a nonprofit that tries to assist the Haitian community as it transitions into America and provides support for all of the different needs that that community has. And so they've been engaged across the country, but also in Springfield in trying to help people adjust to the U.S. and help educate the community at large about that Haitian community.
All right, and particularly in Springfield, there's certainly a situation going on there. So tell me about the severity of the situation in Springfield. A lot of disinformation out there coming from the former President Donald Trump and Senator for Ohio and Vice Presidential candidate J.D. Vance. So what's going on? What's the severity of the situation in Springfield?
Well, the kind of havoc that has occurred over this last month after J.D. Vance and Donald Trump started promulgating lies relentlessly and persistently has really wasn't there before they started running their mouths. So what has happened is that people are suffering threats in the workplace, they're suffering threats in the community, they're distressed. But it goes beyond the Haitian community. And I think that's important to understand. And that's why this was also brought in the form of criminal charges. This isn't just about the Haitian community. It's about all of Springfield. It's about the fact that there were 33 bomb threats, that there were schools, government buildings, and colleges that had to be evacuated and closed, parents not able to send their kids to school, regardless of whether they're Haitian or not. And threats to the mayor and his family and other public officials. So that's extremely serious. And those are criminal acts to essentially cause that kind of panic. And that's why the Haitian Bridge Alliance has filed these criminal charges.
All right, I'm going to ask you now to walk us through the criminal charges. I have a list of them here. So one of them is disrupting public service. Tell me about that charge.
Well, that one almost speaks for itself because see, Trump and Vance know the power of their words. They know. I mean, we know J.D. Vance knows the power of Trump's words because he criticized Donald Trump for his behavior on January 6th. So they know exactly what they're doing. They know that when they spread this disinformation that Haitians are eating dogs and cats, they know that when they say that Haitians are bearing disease, when they say those things, when they claim that Haitians are here illegally, when they are here legally, period. I mean, that's just a fact. When they say those things and they persist in saying those things, even after the governor and the mayor have said that's false, please stop saying that. When they do that, they know that that's going to have an effect on a portion of the population that is then going to act out on the disinformation. They know this. They're not idiots. They know exactly what they're doing. And so their words and their conduct and the persistency and relentlessness of it, even in the face of truthful information, has then caused this kind of ripple effect in the community where public services were disrupted, police and fire communications jammed up, City Hall having to be closed because of these bomb threats. So we directly attribute that to Trump and Vance because they know exactly what they're doing. They know that it's going to have that effect. And remember that when these things were brought to their attention, Trump didn't say, stop it, don't do that. He just again, pivoted to the negative messaging again, the false messaging again. And Vance, the same thing. He just basically demurs when he's asked about the issue.
And I think that covers the next charge, which is literally making false claims, as you just mentioned in your last sentence there.
Making false alarms, yes.
And committing telecommunications harassment.
Yeah, so this is a little bit more of a nuanced one because that statute has a number of different prongs, but one of the prongs relates to aggravated menacing. If you're using or causing to be used the telecommunications for the purpose of essentially harassing other people. And that's what they're doing by ensuring that their videos and their social media messages are getting out into the world to have this effect. There's another prong that relates to communicating information that would be harmful to the reputation of people, accusing them of crimes under these circumstances. So that too also applies here. And I think what's really important, Stephanie, for people to step back, I mean, as a lot of your viewers probably know, I'm a First Amendment litigator. I usually represent plaintiffs in First Amendment actions against governments. And we don't undertake this criminal action lightly, right? Because there's no question that free speech, the highest form of free speech is political speech. And the law about the First Amendment holds that it's entitled to the highest protection, but it's not limitless. So you can't cry out falsely fire in a crowded theater. You cannot engage in disruption of public services and relentlessly engage in speech that has that effect. You can't make false alarms. You can make false statements. The First Amendment protects false statements. But the issue here is when they know it's false, they're persistently disseminating this information to cause the effect that it's having. They're doing that knowingly and willfully. And let's remember that J.D. Vance, when he was confronted by this by Dana Bash at CNN, said, well, he has to create stories for media attention. I mean, he admitted that they're lying. So they know what they're doing. It's calculated. It's to sow this kind of disruption. And I think the most important thing people should remember that if it was anybody else, if I did it, if any of your viewers did it, disseminating this false information persistently and causing these kinds of panics and disruption, telecommunications harassment, aggravated menacing, and so forth, if we did that, we would have been arrested a long time ago. And so this is a moment for the judge in this case to make a decision. Are Donald Trump and J.D. Vance subject to the same rule of law that the rest of us are? Are they going to be held to the same standard, or are they above the law? And that's really what the Haitian Bridge Alliance is trying to accomplish, is to force the judiciary and the prosecutor then to confront something that they're not confronting, which is, does accountability matter? Does the rule of law matter? Do criminal laws apply only to the rest of us, but not to J.D. Vance and Donald Trump? This is a wake-up call for the system.
Well, we do know that the former president, definitely no stranger to criminal charges. He's been indicted. He's been convicted of 34 felonies, and there are
I've talked about that in the past, yeah.
Right. Those are other charges that are ongoing in other places as well. Besides that, this particular case is filed in Clark County Municipal Court, and this is under a private citizen's ability to do this. This is under the Ohio Revised Code. This seems like a very unique situation. How does this happen? Is this something that's only available in Clark County, or is this Ohio-wide?
Well, so this is an Ohio Revised Code statute, 2935.09 and .10. And what they do is they vest private citizens with the right to file criminal charges and ask for review either by a prosecutor or a judge. In this case, the Haitian Bridge Alliance has opted to ask for judicial review because the prosecutor has been aware of these open and notorious facts and hasn't done anything. So what we're trying to do is get a probable cause ruling and arrest warrants issued by a judge, and then the prosecutor is going to be in a more transparent situation trying to explain whether or not they believe in the rule of law. But private citizens have this right in Ohio. And this happened locally in Cleveland in the Tamir Rice case, when a group of private citizens filed a similar affidavit in front of the Cleveland Municipal Court, and Judge Ronald Adrian, then the administrative judge of that court, issued a probable cause finding that officers Lohman and Garmbach should be criminally charged with felonies. Now, we all know the history that then after that, the county prosecutor, apparently did not seek charges in front of the grand jury, and the grand jury didn't return an indictment because of the way that that process was conducted. And that's been widely reported. But the bottom line is this is a process available to Ohioans, and the Haitian Bridge Alliance, and anyone actually, not just Ohioans, any private citizen. And that's why the Haitian Bridge Alliance and its executive director are availing themselves of this right.
Okay, so the next steps in this case then are a hearing before the judge. What are the next steps?
Well, we just learned today that the case has not yet been assigned to a judge, which we find eyebrow raising. It should have happened by now. And what should happen now is that a judge should review the affidavit, and under the statute, the words say forthwith, which means immediately, issue arrest warrants. After affirming that, yes, there's probable cause to support the charges. And the probable cause that's laid out, the facts that are laid out, are just what we already know from the video and the statements and the impact on the community. So it's really, the facts really aren't in dispute. So first, the judge affirms that there's probable cause, then issues arrest warrants, or has the option of sending it to the prosecutor for further investigation. We've expressly asked that the court not do that, not send it to the prosecutor for further investigation, because the prosecutor hasn't acted. We're asking for a probable cause determination and issuance of arrest warrants. Then at that point, it goes to the prosecutor to have a more transparent decision for the public on whether they're going to pursue it. If the court is not inclined or is hesitant to take the action that we've asked for, then under the case law, the court is required to have a hearing. And we're awaiting, first of all, the assignment of a judge, and then an announcement as to which process the court is going to pursue.
Okay, well, we'll definitely be following this. Subodh, thank you for talking through it with us. We appreciate your time here on Ohio Has Issues.
Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate your work.
That was Subodh Chandra. He is the founding partner of the Chandra law firm. A little bit more about him. He is a former federal prosecutor, former law director for the city of Cleveland, and his practice area, among other things, is high-profile civil rights litigation, among other things. So I did reach out to former President Donald Trump's campaign and got this statement about the possibility of charges against Trump and Vance. It came from the campaign's communications director. Quote, President Trump is rightfully highlighting the failed immigration system that Kamala Harris has overseen. President Trump will secure our border and put an end to the chaos that illegal immigration brings to our communities. All right, and that is it for today's edition of Ohio Has Issues. We are coming up very quickly on Election Day. It's November 5th. We've got 5 more regular episodes of Ohio Has Issues. 40 more days until our election night special, which is on November 5th. So I'll be back, and so will Mike next week. We'll see you next week on Ohio Has Issues.